Hello students, welcome to another episode of Recitals in Depth, where we are going to discuss the topics which have come under the section of Polity and Governance for the month of September 2024. The topics that we are going to learn today are falling under the broader themes of important key legislations, various governmental institutions, governmental policy and schemes, and certain constitutional provisions which were there in the news. Stay tuned. Hello students, welcome to Recitals in Depth. So these are the topics that we are going to discuss today, and many of the topics that we are going to cover today contains very interesting topics as well, and the approach that we are going to follow is going to remain the same that we had followed in the previous sessions as well. That is, for every topic we are going to focus on the aspects which are more exam relevant, so that you get to the core of the core concept and its application in the examination. So now let's start with the first topic, which is a very interesting topic to go ahead. And if you'll remember that the topic for the previous sessions, or the first topic of the previous session, was also a very important topic, which was Amrut 2.0. And today we are going to start with Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari initiative. So what is common in between these two topics? So the common thread which is joining these two topics of Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari initiative and Amrut 2.0 is the correlation of water conservation vis-a-vis urbanization. And believe me students, this is one of the most favorite themes which UPSC always picks, usually in the paper 1 of civil services examination. So this is what we are going to discuss. So ultimately, the core important thing that we need to discuss and understand over here is Jal Sanchay and Jan Bhagidari. Since it is very Hindi heavy, so Jal Sanchay means conservation of water, and Jan Bhagidari means people's ownership and responsibility, that people are also a stakeholder for the various interventions for the conservation of water. So now let us try to understand this particular topic. So the approach for learning every topic is going to remain the same. That is, we'll start with the context, that why we are trying to learn this particular topic. Secondly, we'll come to the objectives of Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari initiatives, followed by the various goals of the initiative or the features. It can also be written as features of the initiatives. And lastly, we'll try to understand what are the various other initiatives which are taken by the government of India to augment the water resources, whether be it flowing water or the groundwater. So now let's start with the core element or the motivation behind this particular topic, which is urbanization and its core link with water. Now, as we know that India is urbanizing at a very rapid pace. According to the census of 2011, only 30% of India's total population was staying in India's urban areas. However, according to various reports which is published by United Nations, it is estimated that by the year of 2030, almost 50 to 60% of India's population will be urbanized, which means that in such a situation where the urban centers of our country are already facing situations of water depletion and water scarcity, and if we'll believe the reports which are presented by the UN, if the urban population is going to be doubled in the coming 10 years, imagine the situation of water scarcity which will prevail by the time we will hit 2030. And that is why the government of India has provided a very important priority for the conservation of water, specifically in the urban areas. Why? Because it is the urban areas which determine the entire essence of our own civilization. And secondly, its contribution to the economic growth of our country. And if we really want to sustain this growth in a very sustainable manner, in a very progressive manner, we have to make sure that the cities are replete with water sources, that people who are staying in the cities, who are contributing to the growth of our Indian economy, they are getting decent amount of water to drink and to do their daily chores. So, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, understanding the gravity of the situation, he launched this particular initiative by the name of Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari initiative with the help of the ministry called Jal Shakti, along with cooperation from Government of Gujarat. And what is the primary purpose and the vision which Prime Minister Modi tries to address through this particular initiative? So it is very easy, and it goes from the name itself, that the whole agenda of this scheme is to promote water conservation. But water conservation through what? So the core element is through Jan Bhagidari. That is, it is a very well-known fact in the policy circles as well, that conservation of water is not only a policy issue, or it is not only a governance issue. However, the conservation of water, it entails more and more stakeholders of the society. So government alone, although it is having a lot of resources to conserve water, to go for rainwater harvesting, but government alone will not be able to do it. It requires larger participation of various elements of our society, that is the Jan. So it involves larger social cooperation, participation, and ultimately ownership and responsibility. Ownership and responsibility to conserve water. So when government realize that when society will be made owners of the water resources that they are utilizing, they will be more responsible with the usage of those water resources. And ultimately, how the society is going to do that? Through rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting. Now, as we know that India is having a monsoonal type of climate, and on an average, India receives approximately 110 centimeter of annual rainfall. That is the average for the entire country. And believe me, 110 centimeter of rainfall, it's a huge amount of rainfall if the rainwater harvesting structures are at place. That if we are having enough amount of rainwater harvesting infrastructure, which might lead to artificial recharge of the groundwater resources or the watershed development of these particular areas, through that we will be able to utilize the water resources in a very sustainable manner, and our coming generations will be able to utilize those water resources in the best way possible. And ultimately, water is the core ingredient or an input factor which will promote a very sustainable economic growth and development. And that is why the core agenda or the core features or the goals of this initiative is quite simple. That is, what is the core agenda? That is to conserve every drop of water by employing a method of whole of society. And secondly, by focusing on development of rainwater harvesting structures. So one of the core features of these schemes or this initiative is that it tries to create rainwater harvesting structures of the tune of 24,800 rainwater harvesting structures across the state of Gujarat. Secondly, it tries to utilize the traditional wisdom which is prevalent in the state of Gujarat to provide for local solutions for the problems which the society is facing in Gujarat with respect to the water conservation. Thirdly, it provides for a more efficient use of water in agriculture. And how we can achieve that? Through micro irrigation. So these are the core features of this particular scheme through which the government of India is trying to collaborate with the state of Gujarat itself to promote water conservation and to promote long-term sustainability in the usage of water. So this was all about the objectives and the goals of Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari initiative. However, we should also keep in mind that what are the various other initiatives by the government of India which the government of India is using to increase the level of water sustainability in our country. So the first important element which we need to note over here is the master plan. Master plan to artificially recharge groundwater 2020. So this master plan was prepared by Central Groundwater Board, which is a very specialized agency in the sector of water conservation, and it forms under the Ministry of Jal Shakti itself, along with corporations from various states of our country, which provides for construction of almost 1.42 crores rainwater harvesting structures, so that it will provide water sustainability in the long term and to catch water whenever it is falling. Second important thing which we need to note over here is the Jal Shakti Abhiyan. So Jal Shakti Abhiyan was again a mission driven approach which was run by the government of India starting year to 2019, and ultimately it run the campaign of Catch the Rain, that is CTR, Catch the Rain campaign. In short, it is known as CTR, which again focused heavy on creating rainwater harvesting structures, and it also came up with catch the rain where it falls and when it falls. When it falls. Apart from this, a very interesting thing which we need to note over here is that the 15th Finance Commission, it is also providing funds to various state governments which are linked with state governments' capability to provide for various water conservation measures. Fourth point which we need to note over here is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, under which the unskilled labor or the unskilled labor which is actually mandated under this particular act, it is being used for the purpose of watershed development, and erection of various rainwater harvesting structures. And lastly, which we need to note over here is the Atal Bhujal Yojana. Atal Bhujal Yojana. This is again a very interesting and a very important scheme which is being implemented by the central government of our country, which focuses on augmenting the groundwater resources in water stressed areas or water stressed districts of our country. So by remembering these 5 points, you will be able to write a very good answer or very good 10-marker answer if the question is asking about the government's initiative to conserve groundwater resources. And as we know that since the urbanization is rapidly increasing in our country, it is very much important that such kind of public stakeholdership and public participation followed with ownership and responsibility is followed in conservation of other natural resources as well, like forests or whether be it glaciers or very fragile ecosystems like mangroves, etc. So now let's try to come to the next topic, which is new Notary Portal. Now the core element which we need to understand in this particular topic is what do we actually mean by notary. So notary is a very confusing term which students, they find it difficult to understand it. So now let us try to understand with the core structure that we are going to follow in the discussion of this topic, which is the context. So recently what had happened is that the Ministry of Law and Justice, they launched this portal called the Notary Portal. So before we actually go and discuss the various features and functions of this Notary Portal, we need to understand what do we actually mean by notary. So whenever we are reading newspapers or we are going through various journals, this notary terms, it usually comes in the newspapers, and whenever if we are involved in any kind of legal activities for our own self, for example, whenever we want to go to get a rent agreement done for wherever we are staying, so in that case also we require notaries or the help of the notaries. So what do we mean actually by the notaries? So ultimately it is very easy. So notaries are nothing but public officials. Public officials who are legal professionals. That is, they must be having a degree in law. Legal professionals who are either appointed by the central government or by the state government to do certain important legal functions of day-to-day life, Now one question it should strike in your mind is that why the government has created a separate public official to help the citizens of our country in performing various legal important day-to-day routine works, because ultimately government is very busy. Government is extremely busy. It is burdened with a lot of responsibilities. Now ultimately government wanted to do away with certain very rudimentary and very basic legal functions from its responsibilities, so that it can find more and more constructed time where the government can channelize those energies and resources in more productive areas. So what government did is that it wanted to do away with certain very rudimentary and basic legal formalities and functions, and to provide such functions through a route of public official called notaries. Government had created such notaries, and the government had created these notaries under the Notaries Act of 1952 and subsequent rules which was formulated in the year of 1956. And it is this Notary Act and Notaries Rules of 1956 which governs the various powers and functioning of these public officials who are known as notaries. So this is the core concept. Now, what are the various functions which are performed by these notaries? So one of the easiest and the most simple example which you will be able to relate to is the formation or the creation of rent agreements. So whenever you are going to stay in any PG for your civil services preparation, you need a rent agreement, and you create a 11-month rent agreement with your broker or certain things like that. So ultimately it is the notary which creates any kind of affidavits or oath that ultimately this particular student is going to stay for this period of time with this particular owner, and that is what is called affidavit. Another function of notaries in our country, as suggested by the Notaries Act of 1952, is to certify, attest and verify various important legal documents. Thirdly, notaries also furnish various kind of promissory notes. Promissory notes for payments. And fourthly, in a multilingual country like India, where regional languages are having a very strong hold and very few people know English, so in that case, one of the most important function of notary is to translate and verify whether the translation is correct or not, from if the translation is taking from English or Hindi to any other language as well. So it is the notary who will translate and verify whether the legal meaning has not changed when the translation is being done from any language, whether be it Hindi or English, to any regional language and vice versa. So this was the core and the core functions which the notaries has to perform according to the Notaries Act of 1952. So now let us try to understand what was the need in front of the government of India which led to the creation of this new notary portal. So now let us come to this particular section, that is need for the notary portal. So first of all, digitalization of processes and alignment with digital India. As we know that the government is very, very serious with respect to adoption of various digital processes, that it is trying to minimize both human interface and paper in the entire functioning or the workflow of the government mechanisms. And ultimately by the creation of such kind of portals, we will be able to eliminate various kind of middlemen in the entire process, and the government will be able to align this thing with the Digital India initiative. The second important thing which we need to note over here is the efficiency in administration and avoidance of delays and miscommunication. That is, whenever a particular individual wants to become a notary under the Notaries Act of 1952, they just have to apply to this portal, and it will reduce the number of middlemen, and it will reduce the scope of corruption which might crop up in this particular arena. Why? Because ultimately whenever a person wants to become a notary, then he or she wants to engage with various kind of individuals who will ultimately help them become the notary. So by just using this portal where individuals can actually apply or approach the relevant officials to become a notary, it will reduce the avoidance of delays and miscommunication which happens in our day-to-day lives. So ultimately, and thirdly, which follows from the second point, which is reduction of malpractices. Now, since the notaries also publishes a lot of digital certificates or affidavits or any kind of promissory notes, and all the documents which are published by the notaries will be available in a single digital records or a centralized records, which will lead to more and more transparency in the functions of notaries as well, and ultimately it will create a more centralized database which can be utilized and accessed from anywhere. Any person can access it at any point of time without compromising on the quality of the certificates or the digital documents which has been issued by such notaries. So this was the core of the core need for the development of such portal. Now let us try to understand the various features which are available in this portal. So the first feature which we need to understand is that online submission for appointments and renewals could be done by notaries. So as we already noted in the need section as well, that all the notaries will be able to submit their applications for appointment as notaries through the portal itself, and they do not have to engage in any kind of bribery or any kind of corruption so that they can become a legible notary in our country. Secondly, all the digital certificates which will be issued by the notaries will be available under the app of DigiLocker. Now, which means that if you guys have used the application of DigiLocker, notaries will be acting as a issuing authority in the app of DigiLockers. So any individual who is getting their rent agreement certified or any document attested from a notary, they will be able to access it with the use of DigiLocker itself. The third important part is tracking and monitoring of applications by notaries. So whenever an individual who wants to become a notary in our country, so they can apply through the portal and they will be able to track and monitor the status of their application with the help of this portal itself. However, the fourth feature is the phased rollout, that ultimately this particular portal is available only for the notaries who are appointed by the central government as of now, and this ultimately this new portal will be extended to the notaries which will be appointed by the state government as well, but in the mean course of time. And what can the benefits can we imagine or we can accrue from functioning of this particular portal, and which is very easy. First of all, it will increase transparency. Secondly, it will reduce corruption. Since transparency is more, corruption will be reduced. Thirdly, it will enhance the ease of doing business, because people will be able to get certificates on the DigiLocker app as well, which will fasten up the entire processes. And lastly, it will enhance the ease of living. Ease of living, which Prime Minister Modi is emphasizing a lot in many of his speeches, that ultimately our processes or the governance mechanisms has to be structured in such a manner that it should enhance the ease of living of our citizens, because they should not get hassled through the bureaucratic procedures. So this was all about the new notary portal. So now let's come to the next topic, which is a very important topic again and again from the realm of governance. And here again a new technology, which is the blockchain technology, is being used to provide very important services for the development of entire blockchain ecosystem. So now let us try to understand the context behind it. So recently MeitY, which is Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, it launched Vishvasya-Blockchain technology stack. Okay, this was the core event which was followed in the news, and what it is, what are its functions and features, and how it is going to like promote the blockchain ecosystem in our country. But before we actually get into that, firstly we'll try to briefly see the various important keywords or key concepts which are involved in the blockchain technology. So now let us try to come to that thing. So as we know that, and as we have already studied in various sessions in our science and technology classes as well, that blockchain technology is a very emerging technology in the field of distributed ledger. It is nothing but a decentralized and distributed digital ledger, which is, ledger is nothing but databases. One of the easiest and simplest form of database which is very omnipresent are the Excel sheets or the Google Sheets that you guys use. So those are also databases. Another way of storing such data is with the help of decentralized and distributed digital ledgers or database systems that allows digital information to be recorded and distributed in the form of blocks. And this is what we are going to discuss. What are these blocks? What are hash rates, etc. The transactions in the blockchain cannot be changed, altered and destroyed. It was first proposed in 1991 as a research project, but in the year of 2009 blockchain technology was used to create a first cryptocurrency by the name of Bitcoin. That is this. So what do we actually mean by the various terms like block? So ultimately the core of the core term over here in the blockchain terminology is the block. So what do we mean by block? So ultimately each block contains data, typically a list of transactions. So usually blockchains can be used to note or like contain a lot of financial transactions as well. So whenever a lot of financial transactions are stored in a particular unit, it is called block. And the second important part is hash. So hash is nothing but the address identifier. So whenever there is a block, so suppose this is a block number 1 and it is containing a hash. So this hash is the address identifier of the next block. Similarly, the block 2 will contain a hash or the address identifier of the third block. And with the help of these things, since these blocks are connected with the help of a chain, it maintains the immutability of the blockchain. That is, whatever information it is containing in the block 1, ultimately it is containing two sets of information. That is the core information and secondly the hash for the next block. And since these are connected, ultimately each block is providing a network which is connected with the previous block, and with the help of these things it provides for immutability of information. Because ultimately if we'll try to change or meddle with information which is containing in block 1, it will change the address of the block 2 and ultimately it will lead to the breaking of the blockchain itself. And that is why this technology is considered to be extremely safe with respect to storing of very critical information in the form of the blocks. Third, as we already discussed, what our chains are. Fourthly, we need to understand the nodes. So nodes are those persons who are interacting with this network. So there can be various networks of blockchains. And any person who is interacting with these blockchain network, they are having a copy of all the data with themselves, and these are called nodes. And lastly, important concept which you need to understand is the public and private keys, which are used for creating and verifying digital signatures in the blockchain. So before we go on and discuss the various features, now let us try to understand what do we actually mean by our core topic, that is Vishvasya-Blockchain technology stack. That is Vishvasya-Blockchain technology stack. So what it is actually? So it is trying to provide a platform for various kind of stakeholders. And who can be the stakeholders? Stakeholders are of various types. Infrastructure providers, app developers, etc. And ultimately, what this blockchain technology stack is trying to provide is that it is trying to provide a very or fulfill a very good and very noble objective. That is, it wants to hasten or speeden up the adoption of blockchain technology by the various stakeholders. So ultimately, these are the stakeholders which wants to adopt the technology of blockchain. However, by creating this blockchain technology stack, what the government of India is trying to do is that it is trying to provide the network of blockchain. And ultimately, these stakeholders, they do not have to generate their own network. These stakeholders can use the network which has been provided by the government of India through Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. So through this thing, or it is providing a level playing network or a background or a framework through which all the stakeholders, whether they are infrastructure providers or app developers or any kind of financial security like cyber security providers as well over here, they will be able to use the blockchain network which is developed by the government of India to actually provide services to the ultimately which will be availed by the citizens of our country. This is the core and the core philosophy behind the creation of this technology stack, that the stakeholders who wants to use the blockchain network, they do not have to create their own blockchain network. So it is just providing a very, we can understand it with the help of a very simple analogy, that just like government is providing very huge and broad roads or national highways so that individuals can drive their vehicles over there. Similarly, MeitY is also providing a very large network which is based on the technology of blockchain, through which the stakeholders, which can be app developers or any cyber security experts, they can provide their services to the citizens using this particular network. That is the core of the core function which is provided by Vishvasya-Blockchain technology stack. Now let us try to understand the various basic features and applications which can be used with the Vishvasya. So what are the various features? So rapid end-to-end permissioned blockchain application development. So since the government of India is already providing the entire network of blockchain, so it provides for a rapid end-to-end blockchain application. Secondly, ready-to-use security audited blockchain containers for production setup. Since the network is already set up, all the stakeholder on it or any app provider has to do is to integrate with the blockchain and start producing their own applications. The third is blockchain specific security audit guidelines and best practices. So the government of India, with the help of Vishvasya, is also providing security audit guidelines and best practices so that all the data which is being stored in the blockchain is very secure. Now, since the entire infrastructure or the servers where such kind of information is stored is geographically distributed, and they are using the data centers of National Informatics Center, that is the NIC, which is located in Hyderabad, Pune and Bhubaneswar, and that is why it is again making it even more secure. Fifth point is framework augmented with documentation for easy onboarding of stakeholders, that we already noted that since it is already, the network is already established, it is very easy for the stakeholders to just plug in and play. And lastly, the NBF Lite, that is National Blockchain Framework, which will provide rapid prototyping and research initiatives for all the stakeholders as well. However, what is more important from our examination point of view is what kind of applications can we see from the Vishvasya blockchain technology stack. And the application is quite easy to understand. Now, since blockchain is nothing but a database which is quite secure, and how we are actually trying to store data in the database and how easily we are able to retrieve data from those database actually will determine what kind of application we will be able to accrue with the help of this technology stack. And these are some of the examples which can be used, that is e-stamp solution or application of judiciary, IPS officer services level training, record management. So any kind of record management can be here. forensic applications, pramanik. This pramanik we are going to discuss in quite detail in the next section. Consent management framework, or any domicile certificate chain, or any EWS certificate. So everything can be stored in this particular blockchain stack without compromising with the integrity or the credibility of that particular data. So now let us try to understand what is this pramanik app and how this pramanik app is functioning in the blockchain technology stack. So pramanik app is nothing but a very important app to help citizens verify the mobile app origins. Now it is a very usual occurrence in the various kind of app stores, whether it be the app store by the Google or Apple or by the government of India, that various kind of fraudulent apps are present over there, and whenever an individual tries to download that particular app, it leads to forgery or phishing of that particular mobile phones, and critical information can be extracted from your devices or electronic devices. And to help citizens actually come up with such kind of fraudulent activities, Government of India has created this pramanik app, whose function is to help the citizens verify whether the mobile app which they are trying to download from any Play Store, whether it is original or not, or it is not fraudulent. So how does this particular pramanik app works with the help of National Blockchain Framework or the technology stack which the MeitY has developed? So now let us try to understand it from here. So ultimately, whenever a user is trying to develop or download the app, there are two stakeholders. One is the app owner and second is the citizen who is utilizing or downloading that particular app. So ultimately, this pramanik begins from the mobile app owners itself. So whoever has created a particular app, they will have to get themselves registered in the pramanik application. Now, as soon as the user gets registered over here, the app ownership verification process starts, and ultimately it leads to creation of a digital fingerprint of that particular application, and through that ultimately the user will be enabled. As soon as the digital fingerprint is generated with the application called pramanik, then only the user, this particular app will be provided an opportunity to be used by the end user, that is the citizens. Now as soon as the digital fingerprint for that particular app is generated, the user or the mobile app owners are supposed or required to upload an Android owner application file, which has to be uploaded in the pramanik application itself. And as soon as this thing is done, then only it will be available in the governments or any kind of Play Store which are run by Apple or Google. Now let us try to understand it from the citizen's point of view. So whenever a citizen wants to utilize the pramanik app, first of all, they need to download an app called mKavach. mKavach is again an app which is developed by the Indian government, and as soon as a citizen is able to download the mKavach app, then only the particular citizen will be able to access the government app store or the Google Play Store, which is based on this National Blockchain Framework. And as soon as this particular thing is done and a citizen raises a query that he or she wants to download a particular app which is already registered with pramanik, then what this mKavach does is that it matches the digital fingerprint which is present there in the stack with the fingerprint which is present there with this particular app. And if these two matches, ultimately it signifies that the app which the user is trying to download is actually of original nature and it is not fraudulent. So through this mechanism, the government of India is trying to help citizens by curbing or curtailing various kind of fraudulent activities which takes place in the app stores. And as soon as like the technology is proliferating and every individual is trying to download apps, it is very, very important that whatever apps we are using, we are very much aware about its origins, how and where it stores the data, and for what activities they utilize our own personal data. So this was all about this particular topic. Now let's come to the next topic. which is International Day of Democracy. So now let's try to come to the context of it. So the context is quite simple. So recently the state of Karnataka, it had celebrated this International Day of Democracy, which is celebrated every year on the day of 15th of September. So what was so special that the state of Karnataka did that it actually gained traction across the media houses? So what had happened in Karnataka, that Karnataka created a record by creating a 2,500 kilometer long human chain. Human chain, that is, the individuals were holding each other's hand while actually trying to commemorate or celebrate this particular day. So this was the core context with respect to the International Day for Democracy, which is celebrated on 15 September on every year. Now the core important thing which we need to understand before we go on and discuss about this International Day of Democracy, we need to understand what do we actually mean by democracy. Since we are already living in democracy and every part and parcel of our life is taking within this system of democracy itself, so we should have a very clear-cut understanding of what do we actually mean by democracy. So what do we mean by democracy? So democracy is nothing but a system of government. It is nothing but a system of government where ultimately the power is vested with people. So it is the people who govern the power, and it is the people who decide how this power has to be exercised, and ultimately how it has to be exercised, who will exercise this power, and when they will exercise this power, and for what these powers will be exercised. And ultimately the core lever of control is in the hands of the people only, and this concept is called popular sovereignty, which means that ultimately the power lies in the hands of the people. So it is a very, very important ideal or a political ideal which is called democracy, because it provides the power to the people, to the normal citizenry, to decide who is going to rule them. And ultimately, if the people are not satisfied, they will hold that particular ruler to account and they will change the ruler. So this consequent shifting, this consequent power shifting or transition, it keeps the society in a very harmonious equilibrium, because ultimately it harmonious equilibrium, and by changing these powers from one party to another, by doing that, it actually abrogates concentration of power in the hands of few people. Because ultimately whenever history is replete with examples, and history is filled with such kind of examples where it has been observed that whenever power has gotten concentrated in hands of certain people, it has been utilized or abused in a most horrific manners. And world history is replete with such examples, and World War II, World War I, and various kind of wars which are actually going on right now also in our world domain is a testament to that fact itself. So this was all about the democracy. Now let us try to understand about the International Day of Democracy and what kind of significance does it hold. So before we actually come to the significance, now let us try to understand what do we mean by actually International Day of Democracy. So ultimately this every year on 15th of September, people across the world, they celebrate International Day of Democracy. Why? Because it was the United Nations General Assembly, it had passed a resolution declaring this 15th of September as the International Day of Democracy. And United Nations General Assembly, it passed its resolution in the year of 2007. However, one thing important which we need to note over here is that why did the UNGA chose 15th September as a day to celebrate the International Day of Democracy? Because it was on the same day, that is 15th of September, that the Inter-Parliamentary Union, an international organization which was created in the year of 1889 and which is a aggregation of parliaments across the world and which has got a function to promote representative democracy. Representative democracy. So this IPU or Inter-Parliamentary Union had passed a resolution by the name of Declaration on Democracy. So to commemorate the passing of Declaration on Democracy by the Inter-Parliamentary Union, the United Nations General Assembly decided that it will be better that 15th September should be chosen as a day of celebrating this particular day. And what was the theme of this particular international day? It was AI, a tool for good governance. This was the core theme of this particular day for this year. Now, what are the major significances which is associated with this particular day? Now, as we know that we humans or individuals, we enjoy the festivals. And since the Diwali season is coming, and in few days you will be celebrating Diwali with your friends and family. So every festival is ultimately trying to cherish a particular value. For example, Diwali marks the coming of Sri Ram to Ayodhya, or similarly, Dashera marks the value of victory of good over evil. So similarly, every festival or every day that we are going to celebrate, it is trying to cherish certain values. And these are the values which are being cherished. And what are these values which are being cherished by this particular festival or a particular day? Which is the values of democracy, which can be labeled as justice, political equality, free speech, dignity, etc. So these are the values which every individual should have it in their consciousness whenever they are trying to commemorate or celebrate this particular festival. So what are the significance? And following from this analogy also, let's try to understand what are the significance. So ultimately, by celebrating such, whenever nations or nation states will celebrate or mark this particular day, it will strengthen democracy. How? Because in that particular day, all the nation states will be encouraged to review and assess the state of democracy and the democratic mechanisms and the level of institutional credibility in those particular nation states. And by proper examining and assessing the state of democracy in our country, we will be able to come up with tailored solutions to even strengthen the democracy. So it will give us an opportunity to actually introspect about the level of democracy in our country, about the level of free speech in our country, how much equality is there, and how Indian government or Indian states is trying to protect the dignity of our citizens. And through that, we will ultimately strengthen our democracy. Secondly, as we already noted that it will instill the democratic values of free speech, political freedom, ensuring dignity and political equality, or to provide for secularism and justice to the citizens of our country. The third is encourage participation. Now, as we know that across the democracies, it is a very widely observed phenomenon that people, they do not go and vote. Now, one of the core element of any vibrant functional democracy is the free and fair elections. And free and fair elections is only possible if citizens of that particular country are coming to vote to pick up their representatives. And it has been observed not only in India but across the democracies that people, they show up in these election times in a very lesser amounts. And with the commemoration of such kind of dates, we will be trying to encourage or enhance the participation of people, not only in election, but also in other democratic processes like opinion formations or creation of strong civil society organizations, etc. The fourth important point is, since as we already noted that the theme of this year's International Day of Democracy was artificial intelligence as a tool of good governance. So it provides a very important platform also where countries can discuss the various important contemporary issues which is facing the democracy. And similarly, the democracies across the world should be able to anticipate what kind of threats does the artificial intelligence is going to cause to the democracy, and how they can harness the potential of the artificial intelligence to provide good governance. And if the nation states are able to provide good governance, ultimately it is going to strengthen the democracy. And lastly, it is provide for a global movement for democracy. Now, as we know that democracy is limited to only certain areas of our world only. Not that all countries are following the system of government of democracy. And also the countries who are following the democracy, they are following the democracy in their own format and fashion. So to take the core idea of democracy globally, what we need to do is to celebrate this or to mark this International Day of Democracy, because ultimately it will take the idea of democracy and the subsequent ideas of free speech and political freedom and equality to the rest parts of the world, or the uncharted waters for the democracy, so that more and more countries across the world should adopt the political system of democracy. And this was the core significance with respect to the marking of this International Day of Democracy. Now let us try to understand what are the various threats which are being faced by the democracy of our country. So primarily, again, this can be utilized in your essay and in paper 2 as well. And if you are able to understand these 5 points will be able to bring you a very good marks in writing answers. And these 5 points are the core of the core threats which are being faced by our democracy. The first point is tyranny of the majority. Now, as we know that democracy is based on the foundation of majority rule. That is, whoever is going to get the largest majority, they are going to rule the nation, and they are going to make policies for every individual, also for those individuals who have not voted for that particular party. However, rule of majority does not mean that there has to be a tyranny of the majority over the minority. So even if a particular political party has gained prominence in the parliament, it does not mean that it should not follow the provisions of the constitution, or it should not follow the traditions, norms and conventions of that particular country. And this is the major threat to any democracy of the world, not only in India, but also other parts of the world as well. That ultimately it is the majority which should exercise their power with the spirit of constitutionalism. And what do we mean by constitutionalism? It means that the persons who are in majority, they should follow the power with the sense of limited government. That they should follow the constitutions and the spirit of the constitutions. The second is corruption. The corruption in day-to-day life and institutional corruption is the biggest threat, one of the biggest threat to the functioning of the democracy, because ultimately it abjures the presence of justice. It denies people justice. And when there is lack of justice in our society, there will be an increasing of frustration and discontentment, which ultimately will lead to violence, and it will loosen the democratic fiber of any country. The third is public apathy. What do we mean by public apathy? Public apathy is lack of political attitude. That people does not bothered about what is going on in their country, and whatever is going on in their country, they are not bothered about it. What kind of policies are being formed, whether the air pollution is there or not, whether the people are happy with the incessant pollution or the chronic levels of air pollution. So whenever there is a public apathy, the democracy loses its own essence, because ultimately it is a people where the power resides, and the people, if they themselves are not concerned about how the society has to be governed, it is ultimately leads to decline of democracy in that particular country. Fourth is lack of media pluralism. As we know that media is the fourth pillar of any state or any government, the other three being the executive, legislature and judiciary. And if the media is favoring the government without showing the true reality on the ground, it is ultimately lead to the decay of not only of the democracy but also of the entire social decay. And lastly is the weak civil society. So civil society forms the most important element of any democracy because ultimately it holds to account the ruling party. And secondly, it provides for critical inputs for the formulation of public policies as well. And if the civil society is not vigilant, and if the civil society is not empathetic to the causes and needs of the people of that particular country, the democracy in that particular country is not going to sustain or survive, less about thriving. So this was all about this particular topic. Now let's come to the next topic, which is National Instructional Media Institute. The key term over here is Instructional Media Institute. So now let's come to the context of it. So recently, what is that particular context? So National Instructional Media Institute, it released a series of YouTube videos in their official YouTube channel, so as to for providing two very important functions. Firstly, to mainstream vocational education in our country, and secondly, to make all the instructional material accessible with respect to vocational education. So we need to understand two elements over here. Firstly, it's trying to mainstream vocational education, and secondly, by creating more and more YouTube videos on their official YouTube channel, they are making the content with respect to vocational education more accessible to the citizens of our country. Now, before we discuss the core functions of the NIMI, that is National Instructional Media Institute, firstly, we'll try to understand what do we actually mean by vocational education. That is the core thing that which we need to understand. That what do we actually mean by vocational education. Now, as we know that vocational education, by the term itself called vocation, that is it is a kind of education which focuses on development of a particular skill through which an individual can gain self-employment or any gainful employment. Now, one thing which we need to note over here is that this particular skill is more of practical in nature. It's more of a practical in nature and not theoretical in nature. That is, whenever a person is involved in vocational education, they will be able to get hands-on experience with respect to how to get the things done, rather to just to know only about the theory. For example, whenever we are preparing for civil services also, we are more about the theoretical part. We are reading about various kind of governmental laws. We are reading about various kind of governmental schemes, but that is only theory. We are not able to understand how those governmental schemes or the governmental laws are being actually implemented on the ground. And for that, for you to know how it is actually getting practical implementation, you need to get to the services as well. You need to clear this exam, and that is a part and parcel of this particular exam. So ultimately, vocational education is more about practical approach of the skill. To get you more insights, let me give you an example. So for example, there can be car mechanics. So car mechanics are not necessarily be mechanical engineer, because engineering is a very professional education or professional technical education and not vocational education, so as to say. And mechanical engineering will provide you more with theoretical knowledge. Of course, this theoretical knowledge will be translated into practical knowledge. However, the vocational education will provide a particular person with requisite skills so that that particular person will be able to repair any car at a very like normal cost. Similar examples can be, for example, electrician, plumbers, technicians, medical device operators, or beauticians. So these are the certain examples of vocational trade. That is ultimately through the help of vocational education, any individual will be able to gain requisite skill so that they will be able to get gainful employment which the employer is looking. One of the major problem which our labor sector is facing is that even after taking formal technical education, majority of the employers are actually facing the problems that whenever they are trying to recruit any individual, they are not finding those labor with appropriate skill sets. So with the help of vocational education, Government of India is trying to bridge this particular skill gap so that individuals will be able to get gainful employment by various employers only by doing vocational education. And to help the vocational education gain more traction, gain more mainstreaming and accessibility to various kind of citizens of our country, National Instructional Media Institute plays a very significant role in this particular thing. Now, since we already studied about what is vocational education, now let us try to understand about what are the core functions and vision of National Instructional Media Institute. Now, NIMI, which is National Instructional Media Institute, is a premier institution which was created in the year of 1986 by the name of CIMI, which is Central Instructional Media Institute, which was later renamed as National Instructional Media Institute, and ultimately it is functioning under the Directorate General of Training, which falls under the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So these important details you should keep in mind because it can come handy in the prelims examination. And what is this premier education for? To develop instructional material for the development of vocational education in our country. Now, one important question which should come into our mind is, what do we mean by instructional material? So, instructional material is nothing but a simple say normal material that you study for your own civil services preparation as well. So, instructional material, whenever a student or any individual tries to learn any particular skill, now to help that particular student learn that particular skill, there can be an instructional material which can be in the form of content. Just like you guys read Recital magazines to prepare current affairs. Now, if you will imagine that current affair is a skill, you would need certain instructional material, and this instructional material can be a content, it can be a YouTube video, just like you will watch this particular YouTube video. It can be a DIY or do it yourself videos, or it can be certain kind of tests or assessments. And it is the primary responsibility of NIMI to create instructional materials for development of vocational education in our country, and these instructional materials can take various forms and types based on the skill set which any particular individual is trying to learn. Now, what are the major functions which has to be functions or objectives which are performed by the NIMI? The first is the development, design, production and dissemination of instructional media packages. So this instructional media can be any written content, it can be audio, it can be video, it can be any motion graphic content which will aid the learning of a particular skill set or a vocational skill. The second is it provides for development of mock assessment. Mock assessments so that whenever an individual is trying to learn a particular skill, as soon as they are done with the instructional material, that as soon as you are done with consuming of materials with respect to learning of that particular skill, the next thing which follows is that you should try to assess yourself that whatever was the learning outcome, was it achieved or not. So it is the NIMI which will create question banks or question formats, so that individuals who are trying to learn any particular vocation, they will be able to assess themselves. The third important function which it has to provide, it is to train the content creators. So ultimately it is the primary responsibility of the NIMI itself to train the content creators who are creating this instructional material packages, so that the content creators should have a basic standardization among themselves, so that whenever a student is trying to read it, they will get standardized content and it should follow the core curriculum which has been released by the Government of India, and all the materials which should follow under the curriculum or the syllabus to learn that particular skill. And the fourth is a very important thing, is to translation and production of instructional materials in various regional languages as well, so that language should not act as a barrier when it comes to vocational education in our country. And that is why these things are extremely important with respect to vocationalization of education in our country. And according to the National Education Policy of 2020, it also encourages or prods the state governments to actually mainstream vocational education and carry it simultaneously with the normal course of formal education in our country, so that the government should be able to bridge the skill gap which is very chronic in our labor force. So this was all about NIMI. Now let's come to the next topic, which is a very interesting topic, that is NIMI Property Act. And believe me students, we can expect one or two very good questions out of this particular topic, not only in the prelims but also in the mains part as well. So you should try to understand the core concept behind this particular act. So now let's try to understand the context, that why we are trying to learn this particular topic. So recently in the month of September, around 15 bighas of land, bigha is a unit of measurement of land, was put to auction in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And what was interesting with this particular parcel of land was that it belonged to former president of Pakistan, which is Pervez Musharraf. Since Pervez Musharraf, you will be surprised to know that he was born in the city of Delhi. However, he went on to become the president of Pakistan. However, this particular auction was conducted under the NIMI Property Act. NIMI Property Act of 1968. So in this particular discussion, we are going to deconstruct the various provisions of NIMI Property Act. What do we mean by NIMI? What do we mean by NIMI property? Why this act was instituted at first place? Why it was amended in the year of 2016 and 17, and so on and so forth. So now let us try to understand what do we mean by NIMI property. So as we know that nations go to war with each other, and it happens, world history is replete with such instances. For example, right now Israel is in a continuous war with its neighbors, for example Lebanon, and similarly the nations across the world has gone to war against various kind of powers. So whenever a country, say for example country 1 goes to war with country 2, what has been observed is that the countries seize the properties which is owned by citizens of the second country. That is, the country 1 will seize all the properties which is present within their country, which are owned by the citizens of the second country, since these two countries are warring against each other. And what is the core motivation behind such kind of activity? Motivation is very simple, that whenever two countries are fighting, definitely the country one would not want that all the assets which are being owned by the citizens of country 2 should gain some profits by utilizing the resources of country 1. It is very simple, and it is very basic human tendency that whenever we are fighting with one of our friends only or any other individual, we are not going to give them any kind of benefit. So that is why it is a well-known practice in the global politics that whenever two countries go to war or some kind of aggression, countries try to seize the properties, and these properties which are owned by the citizens of the again aggressing country. Now the properties can be of various types. Properties can be of various types. It can be a land, it can be a mansion, or it can be a fields, it can be gold, jewelry, or it can be a corporation as well. So whenever there is a situation of war between two countries, it is a usual practice, prevalent practice across the world, that the countries will try to seize this particular properties which can take various forms, which is owned by the citizens of another country or another warring country. Now the same situation has happened in India also. Now India has gone to wars in the year of 1962, 65, 71. 62 with China, 65, 71 with Pakistan. Now what had happened during these times is that whenever India went to war with these things, and especially during the partition as well, large scale migration took place. That many citizens of our own country, they went from India to either Pakistan, and some of the citizens, they also went to China when the war started, and they took the citizenship of these countries. And going by the global norms that all the countries follow during the warring times, again India seized the properties of those individuals who migrated to Pakistan or China during the war times and have taken the citizenship of these countries. So what India did is that India seized the properties of such individuals who went to Pakistan or China during the wartime, and they took the citizenship of those countries. Simple. One important facet which we need to note over here is that the government of India, since India is a democracy and we follow the rule of law, so everything which the government is doing, it has to be done according to certain law or certain rules or certain norms. So government of India during this point of time, it utilized the act called Defence of India Act, which was a temporary act, by the way, Defence of India Act of 1962, and its consequent rules as well. And with the help of these act, it tried to seize the property. Now, since it was a temporary act, that is, it was only in force during the wartime. So as soon as the war ended, this particular act did not apply. So what had happened is that with the help of this particular act, which is Defence of India Act, India seized the properties of those individuals who migrated to Pakistan or China during the time of wars with these corresponding countries. And whenever the government of India seized the properties, it gave the custody of such properties to the custodian of NIMI property. It's a central governmental organization which works under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Fine. And similarly, as soon as the war ended, the provisions became frail of Defense of India Act, since it was a temporary act. So what the government did is that it came up with NIMI Property Act of 1968 in the year of 1968, which again established the custodian of NIMI properties, and it delineated the various powers, functions and responsibilities of SEP, which is custodian of NIMI properties. Now we need to note over here, one very important point we need to note over here is that the SEP is custodian of that particular property, and custodian, it does not mean that it is an owner. Custodian means it is just doing the basic management and administration of all the properties which has been seized by the government of India, and it is not an owner at this point of time, and it is just acting as a trustee, and it is holding on to the properties which has been seized by the government of India for the government of India. It was as simple as that. However, what had happened in the mean course of time, that a lot of disputes started knocking the doors of our courts, and one of such disputes was of the Raja of Mahmudabad. So what had happened is that the Raja of Mahmudabad, when India was in war with Pakistan, he left to Pakistan. He migrated to Pakistan. Originally he had belonged to UP, and he migrated to Pakistan and he became a citizen of Pakistan. However, one interesting point which we need to note over here is that his wife and son, they stayed back in India. And since all the properties were belonging to Raja of Mahmudabad, now according to the Defense of India Act and consequent NIMI Properties Act of 1968, what Government of India did was that it took custody of all the properties which belong to this particular individual. Now what happened is that in the year of 2003, this particular person died. Now, as soon as this particular person died, now since he was considered to be his enemy, since he had migrated to Pakistan, however, after his death, his wife and son, they went to the Supreme Court of our country. And they demanded that since Supreme Court of our country, and they demanded in front of the Supreme Court that since Raja of Mahmudabad was enemy under the NIMI Properties Act of 1968 and Defense of India Act of 1962. However, after his death, it is but natural that all the properties should go to their legal heir, which was their son. And this was quite legally very logical and tenable, that ultimately the enemy, which the particular person who was considered to be enemy under the relevant act of EPA 1968, now since he is dead, this property must be transferred to the legal heir, which is the son, which was a very duly credible Indian citizen. So the son and the wife of Raja of Mahmudabad, they demanded that all the enemy properties which were seized by the government of India and was under the custodian of enemy properties should get transferred to this particular son. And this dispute was settled by the Supreme Court of India in the year of 2005, where Supreme Court held that this particular SEP or the custodian of enemy property is only the custodian and not the owner. And ultimately, all the enemy properties after the death of the Raja of Mahmudabad should go to the legal heir. And ultimately, this should naturally, by very logic of economics, it should irk the government of India, because government of India is auctioning such properties and government of India is trying to mint money by auctioning such properties. And whenever the Supreme Court of India gave such kind of judgment where it transferred large swathes of property to the legal heir, it was not economically profitable for the government of India. And what it did to reverse the judgment of Supreme Court, which it had provided in 2005, government of India came up with a lot of ordinances in 2010, which increased the power of SEP, that is custodian of enemy properties, and it increased the power of SEP in such a manner that it provided that the SEP should be the owner and not the custodian, and it provided for the ordinance in retrospect, that is all the like the enemy properties which has been seized since 1968, the SEP should become the owner and not the custodian. However, this ordinance lapsed, and similarly the government of India again in 2016 came up with an amendment which is known as Enemy Properties Amendment and Validation Bill of 2016, which was passed in the year of 2017, and it enhanced the power of SEP in the similar fashion that SEP will be the owner of all the properties which had been seized by the SEP, and it is just holding the property for the central government. So in a way it made the central government the owners of all the seized properties. So now let us try to understand the core changes which has been brought through the help of this particular amendment. So before the amendment, enemy definition was quite limited and country and citizens committing external aggression was considered to be enemy. However, this particular definition changed, and see the extent of expansion of the definition of enemy, that with the amendment bill which was brought in 2017, it expanded the definition to include legal heirs as well, successors and firms, even if heirs were Indian citizens or nationals of non-enemy countries. So it made the natural heirs or legal heirs of that particular enemy to be enemy itself. Vesting of property, that is vesting of property with the custodian, and after conflicts with Pakistan and China, it prohibits, after the amendment, it prohibits Indian citizens who are legal heirs of enemies from inheriting enemy properties. Divestment, allowed divestment and return of property by the government. Earlier it was very easy and affable that whoever was the enemy was able to divest the property, or they could sell the property to some other individual. However, this return allowed only after government review. Property must not be an enemy property. Transfer by enemies, earlier it was allowed, ultimately it was prohibited. Jurisdiction of court, earlier the civil courts were allowed to entertain the disputes which pertain to the enemy properties in our country. However, with the 2017 amendment, it revoked the powers and the jurisdiction of the civil courts in such matters. And lastly, power of the custodian. Earlier it allowed custodian to preserve property and maintain enemies in India, and now it permits custodian to sell, lease, mortgage and collect rent or evict occupants, because ultimately custodian is nothing but the central government who is becoming custodian with the help of custodian of enemy properties, which functions under the Ministry of Home Affairs. So this was all about the enemy properties. What is more important is that we should try to understand what is enemy and how the definition of enemy has changed, and how does the government tries to auction such kind of like properties which the government of India has seized. Now let's try to come to the next topic, which is Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology. This is again a very important topic, especially from the learning point of view. Many of our aspirants, they come from very rural background. They come from various linguistic backgrounds, that certain particular person, they have studied their entire school in Telugu, Tamil, Kerala, say Malayalam, etc. However, whenever we come for the preparation of UPSC civil services, such kind of students, they face very typical problem that they are not able to find proper relevant books. Especially, for example, let me take an example. So all the Hindi medium students who are preparing for civil services examination, they are not able to find qualitative books or qualitative content which might aid their preparation for this particular examination. And same thing happens for the students who are going for technical education, whether be it of engineering or of medical. So this Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology is a news because of this particular aspect only. And what is this aspect? Now let's try to learn. So what is the context? So recently this CSTT, that is Commission on Scientific and Technical Terminology, it released a website by the name of Shabd. Shabd means word in English. And this Shabd, although we are going to discuss this in quite detail in the coming section, this Shabd is nothing but a keyword or terminology search engine. So we will try to discuss this, what is this particular Shabd, in quite detail in the coming section. However, before we do that, firstly we'll try to understand few very important things. Firstly, what is the link between learning and regional languages? So as we know that India is a multilingual country, majority of the citizens of our country are usually, they are more converse and they are more comfortable in conversing their own native tongue or regional languages or mother tongues. However, the mode and nature of the education in our country has been quite English dominated. That majority of the good content or the supporting materials or books are available in the Indian languages. However, through various psychological researches, it has been observed that learning is very directly correlated with the language of instruction. That is, if a person is having a mother tongue of, say, Maithili, if that particular student is being taught engineering in his own mother tongue, then his learning outcomes will be very much enhanced. And the same kind of situations we see in our preparation for civil services as well. That students, although they understand a particular concept, but they are not able to write those concepts in the language of English or in language of Hindi. And that is a problem which many students are facing. And same kind of problems it happens with respect to the technical education as well. That is, whenever a student from a regional background goes to any engineering college or any medical college, there the student is not able to cope with the English language. There the student is not able to understand the scientific and technical terminologies which are only present in English language, and the substitute of that particular terminologies in the relevant native language is not present. So what the government of India, with the help of Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminologies, it did is that it collated a great degree of scientific and technological terminologies and converted it into their own specification interpretation of in the regional languages or the native languages. So this is the core of the core with respect to the functionality of the Shabd, that CSTT has created a very important website or a web search engine where any student who is studying any kind of technical education or any kind of higher education, they should be able to learn or grasp the important knowledge in their own native tongue or in their own mother tongue with the help of the Shabd. So what Shabd does is that it will allow the student to search any particular scientific terminology or terms in their own native language, and vice versa. That is, if a student is able to provide a particular term in their native language, the Shabd platform or the search engine will convert it into English or any other languages, which is the 22 scheduled languages in our constitution. So it has, the CSTT has provided a great function with respect to taking the regional languages in our learning systems and making the native tongue or the mother tongue a significant component in our learning systems as well. Apart from that, our National Education Policy 2020, it also emphasizes that engineering and medical science should also be taught in the 22 scheduled languages, so that ultimately it will make such kind of higher education more and more inclusive and it will ensure equity among various regions of our country. So this was all about the Shabd in a way. But now let us try to understand what do we actually mean by Commission for Scientific Technologies and Terminologies. Now let us try to know about the Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminologies. So CSTT, in short, it was established in the year of 1961 under the Article 344 of our Constitution, and with a primary purpose to evolve terminologies which are very scientific and technical in nature in our regional languages or 22 scheduled languages, so as to make the learning of sciences and technical fields more and more inclusive. This was the core agenda before creating this CSTT. Now what are the major functions which are being performed by CSTT? Which is development of scientific and technical terminology, that is to define and evolve scientific and technical terms in Hindi and Indian languages. Secondly, providing necessary terminology to the National Translation Mission, so that all the terminology should be translated in all the 22 scheduled languages of our country. Thirdly, it should ensure dissemination, that it should ensure that terms and definitions reach students, teachers, scholars, scientists and officers in a much more efficient manner. It will take feedback and improvement from various stakeholders like students, scientists, academias, industries, so as to with the usage and translations which this particular organization has provided. It will encourage technical writing in the regional languages, so that it will provide for indigenization of technical terminologies in our country. Sixth, it will coordinate with the states and agencies to ensure uniformity of terminology across Hindi and other Indian languages. And lastly, it will provide for publication support as well, so that all the technical terminologies which this particular organization is trying to evolve will be able to publicized in a much larger manner, so that it reaches every nook and corner of our country. Now let us try to understand what our government is also doing to promote the regional languages in overall education system as well. So the first important point which we need to note over here is the promotion of classical and tribal languages. So you'll be surprised to know that according to the National Education Policy of 2020, it wants that all the technical education, whether be it engineering or whether be it of medical sciences, it should also be performed in the tribal languages or the local languages. And almost engineering and medical sciences are being provided in 17 tribal languages, so as to make the education system more inclusive, and it should provide for more equity among the various regions of our country. Second point important which we need to note over here is that again the National Education Policy of 2020, it provides that the early education, especially the early education of a children, should be mandatorily be provided in their mother tongue, so that child's cognitive development should be much more faster. And secondly, the learning outcomes will also increase. The third is 3-language formula. So the government is also implementing the 3-language formula. Under the 3-language formula, government is trying to create a more multilingual citizenry, so that 3 kind of subjects will be taught according to 3-language formula, which is English, Hindi and 1 regional languages, so that any citizen or any individual who is trying to follow the 3-language formula will be having linguistic competency, and he will be much more inclined to know larger knowledge ecosystems with the help of these 3 languages. The fourth is National Translation Mission. As we already noted, National Translation Mission, whose objective is to translate all the relevant materials which are present there in our knowledge domain into the 22 scheduled languages. Bharat ChatGPT group is a very important and a very innovative initiative which was launched by students of IIT Bombay. So as we use ChatGPT, but the ChatGPT understands language of English only with the help of large language models. However, with the help of Bharat GPT group, this Bharat GPT is using the large language models of our regional languages as well. And with the help of the regional languages, students or citizens who are belonging to the regional places or who are well versed with the regional languages, they are able to use the Bharat GPT. And lastly, in NCERT textbooks are also published in regional languages so as to take the higher curriculum and the higher quality of pedagogy to the nook and corner of our country, so that any individual who is well versed in their own unique mother tongue or regional languages, they should not be devoid of the good quality books which is published by the NCERT. So these are the prominent interventions which are being taken care by the government of India to make our education system more inclusive and sustainable. Now let's come to the next topic, which is again a very, very important topic in our today's times, which is right to disconnect. Now let's try to, as you can see it from the image itself, that an individual is trying to disconnect. So what is this disconnection all about? So now let's try to learn this particular topic. So what is the context? So recently a very unfortunate event had taken place in the company of Ernst & Young, which is a business consultancy firm, that one of its employees, a woman, she died. Ultimately a very unfortunate event. She died because of overwork. And similar kind of situations has been going around in our social media circles as well, where a bank employee of SDFC was abusing their own employees. Similar kind of debate was going on by our tech IT stalwart Narayan Murthy, who claimed that the Indian youth should work almost 80 to 90 hours per week. So such kind of events had taken place in our corporate work culture, and it demands and it deems for a larger inquiry and discussion with respect to the rights and responsibilities of both employers and the workers who are present over there. And this right to disconnect is actually entailing the same debate. That is, it emphasizes this right to disconnect. It emphasizes on the right of an employee to disconnect from what? From any work related communication. From any work related communication. And work related communication can take any form. It can be emails, it can be messages, it can be Zoom sessions. But when does the person is having the right to disconnect from work related communications? After the office hours. After the office hours. That is, after their contractual or official hours. Now, as we know that we are being surrounded by technologies, and technology is getting every day more and more intrusive. So what this technology is trying to do, or trying to alter the expectation matrix within the workplace. That is, because of the omnipresent technological instruments that we are having, we are carrying phones, we are carrying laptops, we are carrying tablets, and all these devices are also integrated. And whenever there is one mail, it will pop in all the three devices. So ultimately what this technology has done is that it has changed the expectation matrix which is present in the workplace. So what it has altered is that now all the employers are expecting their workers to be present all the time. This is happening because of two reasons. First of all, because of the technology, and second of all, because of the changing nature of work as well. Changing nature of work. What do we mean by changing nature of work? Because now the work is going on 24/7, and we are living in a globalized world, that where a person sitting in India is providing services to a person sitting in USA, which is almost having a time lag of 14 hours. That is, whenever a person is doing a night shift over here, it is day in United States of America. So all the work flows and work processes are going on simultaneously across the world, and one of the stakeholder of a value chain is sitting in India and another stakeholder of the value of the same value chain is sitting in another part of the world, and they both have to coordinate and collaborate with each other in the same time so as to deliver value to the customers. And this is what is actually further perpetuating this digital presenteeism. Digital presenteeism, which means that employees are expected to be present all the time to answer or to to provide solutions to the queries of their boss or to the queries of the customers. And that is why this this particular discussion is very pertinent during these times, that we need to discuss the need for this right to disconnect. So now let's try to come to the right to disconnect or the need for the right to disconnect. So the first is mental health. Now, as we know that after going for a toil of 8 to 10 hours, if we are trying to work 8 to 10 hours in our offices, we definitely need certain time to recharge. We definitely want certain buffer from our office and from our home. So this is home and this is our office. And as soon as we come out of the office, we do not want any kind of, say, stressful conversations which might again pour in to our homely environment. And it is very, very important for the benefit of our mental health as well. Second is work-life balance. Now, majority of the persons, they are of the opinion that there has to be a work-life balance. Both office and life or the home are two significant components of an individual's life. And an individual has to balance both these aspects to gain a more sense or meaning out of their life. And to provide more work-life balance in their life, there has to be a right to disconnect, where as soon as a person walks out of the office, all the stress, anxiety, ambitions, or the obligations which are related to the office, they will leave it over there in the work itself. And now the person will be entitled to enjoy the life with their loved ones, or nurture or garner the social relationships that we are in. Thirdly, increased productivity. It has been observed that if there is a more work-life balance, it has been found by various psychological researches and operational management researches that ultimately it translates to more and more productivity in the offices as well. So with more and more time given to the employees to release themselves, ultimately it will lead to more and more productivity increase, ultimately which will benefit the companies itself. Fourth point is protection against the exploitation. Now, ultimately we know that with increasing flexibility in work arrangements such as gig economy, it has created an expectation matrix of constant availability, as we already noted. So as we will provide some right to disconnect, we will be able to buffer our employees from any kind of exploitation once the office hours are done. And lastly, physical health. Since the mental health is directly correlated with physical health and vice versa, it is very, very important to nurture and to conserve the mental health so as to bolster the physical health of the employees. Now, before we go on and discuss the various issues with respect to the right to disconnect, what are the global practices which are being practiced? So ultimately, France was the first country in the world which legislated the right to disconnect in the year of 2017. So it goes quite way back. Secondly, Australia also has recently provided a legislation for the same, that is right to disconnect, in the year of 2024 itself. Major industrial country like Germany, although it does not have any explicit legislation for right to disconnect, however, major companies which are present there in the country of Germany, they have it as their implicit policy. And let's not talk about India, because India is way way far with respect to the application or development of human capability of the labor or thinking about the mental health. So India is way far with respect to even the discourse of implementing of right to disconnect in our country. Now let's try to see what can be the issues or what are the arguments which are against the right to disconnect in this particular debate. So ultimately, as we know that the Entire world is globalized. There is a value chain. One of the stakeholder, one employee of that value chain is sitting in India, another is sitting at Australia or USA, and they have to coordinate, collaborate at the same time. And that will be only possible if there is flexibility. And with right to disconnect, it will hamper the flexibility which is present over there in the functioning of the processes which are there in the workflow. So ultimately, it will reduce the flexibility. Second is the challenges in enforcement. Although any country might come up with legislation which will promote right to disconnect, however, the mechanisms for the enforcement of right to disconnect will be very ambiguous and will not be able to enforce it in the right spirit. The third is cultural resistance. There are certain companies, to name some, for example, SpaceX, where there is a culture that every employee has to work for almost 100 hours or 90 hours per week. And this is also propounded by the founder of SpaceX as well, that is Elon Musk. So, and people or employees of that company itself, they willingly want to work this much harder for their particular company, and they want to be always available for their bosses or for the customers. So in that case, this will create or destroy the company culture as well. Fourth is the impact on team dynamics. As we already noted that nowadays teams are extremely remote. Every element or every member of the team is sitting at different places, and if the team has to collaborate and coordinate, they have to sit together irrespective of the timelines in which they are operating. So ultimately, it can hamper team dynamics as well. Client relationship management. As we know that ultimately the satisfaction of the client is sole important thing which a company cares for. And the client satisfaction or the customer satisfaction, it depends on the prompt or the timely responses by the consultants or the employees. And if there will be a right to disconnect, then that particular employee will not be able to cater to the problems of the customer, which might lead to client relationship mismanagement, or customers will be dissatisfied, and that is why it might lead to a problem for the companies. The fourth is competitiveness concerns. That is, it might be a possibility that certain countries might adopt such right to disconnect policies, however certain countries will not, and the countries which will not adopt such policies, they will be at a better position to address to the core demands or needs of the customers, and they will be able to satisfy them better. And in this case, the customers, when they would want to give them business, they will give businesses to those countries in which there is no right to disconnect. So ultimately, it will provide a competitive edge to those countries which are not having right to disconnect. And these are the core dichotomies which any country has to follow while with respect to designing and curating labor laws. And lastly, lack of customized for varied role jobs. As we know that not every job role is similar or like having similar kind of circumstances which any employee has to go. And there are certain kind of job roles which requires more attentiveness, more promptness from the employee towards their customers or towards their bosses. So ultimately, this right to disconnect will be a one-size-fits-all approach which will ultimately sap up the efficiency of the performance of duties or the obligated duties by the employees. So these are the major arguments which are against the right to duties. From the India's point of view, a lot of issues already need to be resolved in the labor sector, which starts from skilling to large scale unemployment and internship. So Indian policymakers should also give it a thought with respect to how they can bring up a legislation or any kind of internal policy materials or tools through which a semblance of work-life balance can be achieved at the workplace. So this all for this topic. Let's come to the next topic.